Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see you on this rather cold evening of Hong Kong. Thank you for coming out tonight. I think we're a mixture of some Methodists, some from CUHK, welcome, followers of Jayeel, no doubt, and so welcome to you all. It's really good to see you. Thank you for coming. We're just finishing the Asia Methodist Conference, or the Conference of Asia Methodist Churches have been together here in Hong Kong. Jayeel has been our keynote speaker, and we're draining every last drop out of him. So with this final lecture, he flies back tomorrow to the US on his, was it 31 or 34-hour flight? It's a long way anyway. So thank you so much for staying for this evening to speak to us. As you can see, the title, Young People's Barometers of Religious Change. I remember in my grandparents' house, they had a barometer on the wall in the hallway. And it was an old wooden barometer. And every day my grandfather would tap on it and the needle would move around, telling you the temperature or the pressure of the day. Normally it was cold and wet and raining, but that was England. But here we are, young people, barometers of religious change. Some of us were very fortunate to hear Jayeel speak on Monday evening. Yeah, at 9 o'clock. And I think you're going to do some of that lecture and adapt it slightly, or?
This might be a little different.
A little different, yeah. Okay, great. So a few things about Jayeel. I'm sure you've had your CV read out several times now at the conference, but Jayeel is the visiting professor at the Center for Asian Democracy at the University of Louisville. Is that right, how you pronounce it? Louisville. Louisville. Louisville, yeah, wow, that's good. But you're on sabbatical from the University Ateneo de Manila. Yes, so, and how much longer will you be in the States for?
Until July.
July, and then you're back to Manila. Great. So he's published many books, he writes in many scholarly journals, and he's interested in religious change, religion, public life, and the sociology of generations. So thank you for being with us for these few days. Thank you for staying tonight and giving us this lecture. And I think you'll take some questions and answers at the end, and we can engage in a bit of a conversation as well. So let's give a big welcome to Jayeel Cornelio.
Great. Thank you so much. Oh, wow. Thank you very much, everyone. It's good to be home. In many ways, Hong Kong is a home to me. As I was telling our colleagues and fellow pastors and ministers at the Asian Methodist Council, so there was a big event hosted by HK Methodist Church Hong Kong this past week, which ended today. Reverend Tim Lam is here, our beloved president, and he was as I was telling them, Hong Kong is among the countries that I consider home, only because back in 2018, I was a visiting professor at the Divinity School of Chung Chi College at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Some of them are here. Really, really happy to see former students of mine who are now pastors themselves in their respective churches, and rising scholars who are interested in religion, Philippines, and so forth. Although tonight, what I want to share with you is beyond the Philippines. And I imagine that many of you would be also very interested in how religiosity and religious life is changing among young people today. Those of you who are here based in Hong Kong would know that this is not a very easy topic to talk about. It's not. Because of the circumstances that we are in Hong Kong. The COVID, the social, political situation, and so forth. We'll try to cover as many things as we can in the course of my time here. I don't intend to dominate the entire time. I want, maybe for the sake of a fruitful time together, we'll spend more time with the open forum and maybe conversations about what you think really matters. Some of you might be here because you're academics, but some of you are also here because you're ministers and very much interested in the religious lives of young people. Because I'm a sociologist, I'm going to be asking you questions. And sociologists are notorious for always asking questions and not providing answers. Um, um, and one of the strengths of sociologists is running surveys, quantitative sociology, social science. Some of my colleagues here, my friends here, are sociology majors. I'm going to be posing some questions. The format is what we call semantic differential scale. Okay, a very boring name, very boring label. This is what it looks like. There are two different adjectives, opposite, totally opposite each other. On the one side is the negative one. On the opposite side is the positive one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is very different from the usual Likert scale. You know, how much do you agree with something? Very much agree, not at all agree. This is different. Here, I'm going to ask you to locate yourself on any of these 5 numbers, depending on how close you are to either adjective. So this is the sentence. Let's try, okay? And just put just raise your hand, and let's just put this to it's just a survey, okay? And I want you to be honest, okay? Even if you are on the negative side, don't feel bad about it. It's a survey question. This is the sentence. In my experience, it is blank to understand the youth in my church. In my experience, it is blank to understand the youth in my church. Number 5 is easy. Number 1 is difficult. Where do you locate yourself? Are you number 5? Are you number 4? Are you number 3? Are you number 2? Are you number 1? Okay? I'm going to be asking you. Let's try this. Who would say you're number 5? Okay, 1. I see 1 hand. Okay, good. Good. No pressure. Okay, don't look around. You're not allowed to compare this is not a competition, okay? Nobody goes to heaven for answering number 5. There are other reasons for going to heaven. Okay? Who would locate yourself on number 4? Okay, I see 2. So meaning to say you're closer to easy, okay? Who would locate themselves on number 3? Yes, play safe, okay? This is where this is the problem with the midpoint. I should have removed it. All right, to force yourselves. Okay, so one more time, number 3. Okay, so neither easy nor difficult, okay? Okay, you gotta be honest. Who would be number 2? Okay, I see 3 hands. Thank you for your honesty. So you're closer to difficult. And who would say number 1? Difficult. You will not go to hell for saying number 1. Okay, good. Thank you for being very participative. So I take it that for majority, you're number 3. You don't know how to locate yourself. So maybe it's easy, maybe it's not easy. Okay, that's the first question. We're just sensing, okay? I want to understand where the audience is coming from. This is the second one. Right now, I am blank to dialogue with young people in my church. Right now, some of you may not be necessarily part of a church, so maybe you can think of it in terms of your community. Okay? So those of you, I'm not assuming that everybody is part of a church. It could be in your community. Okay? So right now, I am blank to dialogue with young people in my church. Number 5 is confident. Number 1 is scared. Confident, scared. Let's do this. Who would say number 5? Confident. Okay, 3, 4. Okay, because you're a youth pastor. Okay, so you can't be anything else. Okay, so you're number 5. All right. So there are 3. What about number 4? Okay, so this time it looks like the majority is number 4. Okay, number 3. Okay, the play safes. Okay, so number 3. Okay. Number 2. Number 1, scared. Nobody's scared. Reverend Tim, where are you? Number 4. Why number 4?
Because myself is a very confident.
Okay. Thank you, Lord.
And the young people in my church tends to respect me a lot. So they won't reject me. At least they will answer my questions and try to talk to me.
So because are they confident about young people in your church? That's why they talk to you.
Half and half.
Half and half. Very honest, Reverend Tim. Okay, so it's number 4 for Reverend Tim. Very confident about the young people in his church. Dialoguing with them. Okay. You said number 4? 3. Oh, half-half. Playing safe. Is that you really? Is that your personality?
Playing safe personality, yes, probably. I think, well, I'm sad to say I don't spend a lot of time talking very deeply to the youth, so I'm sorry to leave that to Eric. So that's my confession. So, but I see them and coffee after church, and occasionally. So, to have a deep dialogue, I haven't, and that's probably something I need to work at. So casual conversation, it's okay, but take me any deeper into a youth cultural conversation, I'd be struggling.
Struggling. Okay. Would you say, so you're number 5. Pastor Eden is saying that he can strike up conversations with young people, but not necessarily deep conversations. Are you able to pursue deep conversations with young people?
Yes. I am. I've really been. I think when I started my ministry, I would have played it safe and said a 3. But once you really start chatting with them, once you start posing them challenging questions, you'll find out how engaging, how smart, how willing they are to share what they know, their experiences, and it's one of the most rewarding things that has come along in my life.
Good. And so it's an affirmation of, you were also a teacher at one point, weren't you? Yes. You were also an English teacher, so also the experience. Okay, so that's the second question. This is the third one. It's getting a little bit more difficult, okay? This is the third one. Based on what I see, young people in my church are 5 is active, 1 inactive. This time you cannot play safe. Maybe you can. I don't know. Let's try. Who would say, so based on what I see, young people in my church are number 5, active. Okay. Number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Number 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Thank you. Number 2. Number 2. All right. Oh, so there seems to be a equal number of number 2s and number 3s. What about number 1? Number 1, I wanna talk to you. Remind us your name again. Andrea. So it's number 1 for you.
Yeah.
It's inactive. Thanks for being brave, though. Plus points for you.
It's point. Because I'm one of the
You're one of the inactive.
Yeah, because there's a lot adults in our church, and comparing to them, the young people are comparatively inactive.
I see. And how would you define, in your experience, why would you consider somebody active and somebody else not active? What indicators suggest to you that, okay, this one is active, the other one is not?
Whether they enjoy being at the church, or do they join the programs, or whether they personally they enjoy being in the church or not.
So it's the adults who enjoy church more
Yeah.
than the young people.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for being honest. Catherine, you were number 4, right? You said number 4. Did you say number 4?
Yes.
Number 4?
Yeah.
What's your observation? Tell us.
I'm glad to say that even in the church council, there are quite a number of young people, and they are how do I say, they are willing to share their points of view. Yeah. They will comment on the agenda, or the matter to be discussed, and so on. Yeah.
So young people in the council, how old are they?
Quite a number in the early 30s or late 20s. Yeah.
It's good. It makes me feel good to be considered young when you're still 30s, right? I'd like to think that I'm still closer to that generation, or so I think. Okay, thanks very much. So we've got two perspectives. For Andrea, being active is about enjoying being part of the church, whereas for Catherine, being active is about being able to ask tough questions within the leadership. So again, this is the nature of surveys. You have one sentence and it can be interpreted in so many ways, okay? Final question. Let's see. In my view, the opportunities for young people to participate in my church are enough, not enough. Enough. You're starting to hate me now, aren't you? Right. So, enough or not enough? Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm asking you simply to just reflect and to think, okay? Or in my community, okay? Number 5, enough. There's 1, 2, 3. What about number 4? Good. Number 4, okay. Number 3, there are 3 of you, good. 2, okay. So there are 3 of you, including Pastor Eden. And number 1, not enough. Ivan is saying not enough. Let's start with the negative one. Ivan.
Hello. Why not enough?
Why do you say it's not enough?
It's not enough because even if there's a lot of talk about synodality recently, the structures on the ground has not really adapted yet to the idea. So even if there's supposed to be more participation, the institutions that are supposed to bring in young people to participate have not fully matured in the local communities.
So it's one thing to say that yes, we are open to having more young people, but it's another thing
Yes.
to really assess whether the organizations.
Yes, maybe also drawing from my own personal experience when I was younger, I felt systematically excluded. So I think that there's still that tendency in the level of the parish.
We're going to talk about that shortly. Let's hear another perspective. Who said number 5? Pastor Ismail, right? Yeah, you, that's what you said.
Yeah, particularly in the Philippines, we have lots of options for the young people. So we have this lots of programs that they can participate. Even in the global level, in the United Methodist Church, we have these options to allowing youth to participate. And yeah, even in the leadership, actually, we have now at least, not at least, we have the youngest bishop now. It was 39 years old. So I think, yeah, we have enough avenues and opportunities for young people in our church.
In the Methodist Church, who would you consider young?
United Methodist Youth Fellowship, Eden Joy is here from 12 to 24, and the young adult is 24 to 40 plus, 45. Yeah, you are. I'm still young adult also, yeah.
I think some of you here said number 3. Was it you or was it you? Did you say number? You said 2. I want to hear from. Sorry if I may just pass through. You said number 3. What's your name? Sorry.
Daniel.
Danny. Hi, Danny.
I think I'm thinking about the opportunity because our church young people, I think they have chance to participate in church, but they are not willing to, or they are not maybe enjoy or something to to participate in the church. So I think this is not the problem of enough opportunity, but they are how they willing to participate in the church. So
for you, the issue is not the opportunities, but the willingness of young people.
yes,
That's why you're number 3.
yes,
Because so even if there are 100 activities,
yeah,
young people are not if not young people are not willing,
yeah,
they will never be enough.
yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Also, they do not know how to play the game. What is? Oh, that's right.
Finished.
Finish. Right. So they don't. Who doesn't know how to play the game?
Don't know how to fill in the application form, and there are so many layers of application.
So the design, the very design of getting young people to participate. We can come up with a big research about this in Hong Kong and really see where churches stand or faith communities stand. Let's look for funding, Pastor Eden. I'm happy to be the principal investigator. Because that in itself says a lot. And maybe some of the things that I will be sharing with you tonight will be very useful in making us think about where young people are. You see, where am I coming from? These are just 3 of the books that I've written or co-written related to young people and religion, youth and religiosity. As a sociologist, I'm very interdisciplinary. Having taught at Chung Chi at the Divinity School, I'm very comfortable in the theological language, but I'm also very much a sociologist. I'm quite familiar with how things are changing, especially in a country like the Philippines or Hong Kong or Singapore. We all have our respective socio-economic contexts, different situations. Hong Kong far more advanced than, say, the Philippines. But I think there are similar issues that our young people are confronted with. And I'm happy to share with you some of the findings that I have from my own research and beyond. So on the one hand, where I'm coming from is the academic side. But on the other hand, I also have to be very honest because this is a faith community. I can be probably reflexive about this also. I have a background in ministry, having served at one point as a youth pastor. I no longer am, but my heart goes out to those who are involved in youth ministry because I know that it's not easy. So I also have that experience, and having worked with different young people, that you feel that you've done everything that you could, and nobody's still coming. Because of these experiences, I think I have a much richer, I feel, appreciation of maybe what's happening. And I'm going to share with you some of these things that might inform also how, number one, we think about how religion or faith, I'm just using this synonymously, although they are also very different from each other if you tease them out very carefully. But for now, let me just use this word synonymously: faith, religion, tradition, religious community. But at the same time, I'm also hoping that this can help us think about the ways we respond to the faith community. The other thing I wanted to say is that we need to start thinking about what we mean when we say that young people are barometers of religious change. You're absolutely correct, Pastor Eden. The barometers tell us the weather that is about to come, right? They more or less give us a forecast of whether a typhoon is coming. So today we know that it was going to be cold, so you all brought out your winter jackets. Because I was in the US, I just assumed that it was much warmer in Hong Kong, and then I am very much regretting not having brought my winter jackets with me, because in the US right now where I am, in Louisville, it's about 3 degrees, 4 degrees, and anything beyond 10 degrees is already warm to me, and now I'm regretting that I did not bring any of my jackets. So you need to have a barometer to be able to tell you that this is going to be the situation. Where are we coming from as sociologists when we say that young people are barometers of religious change? There are 2 theories at work here. I don't want to be academic, but let me just explain this to you. There's one theory that says People become religious as they age. People become more religious as they age. It's called the life stage effect. Meaning to say, people are starting to realize that one day they will die. So the closer they are to death, the more likely that they are inclined to think about the afterlife. That's the theory of the life stage effect. That's one. The other theory is what we call the cohort effect. Cohort effect, meaning to say, the religiosity that you have today is also the religiosity that you grew up in. So, old people, the elderly of today, tend to be more religious, tend to be more active in church, tend to be enjoying the services and the church more because they grew up enjoying church like that. So it's a theory in sociology called socialization. So you grew up having been socialized into that environment. So by the time that you reach 60, 65, you carry that with you. Even if you may have forgotten it when you're in your 30s or 40s, later on it comes back naturally. That's the cohort effect. Meaning to say, from that perspective, if young people today, say 10 years old, 20 years old, are no longer active at church, based on that theory, by the time that they reach their 40s, their 50s, and their 60s, they have nothing else to transmit to the next generation in terms of beliefs and practices, religious beliefs and practices. So that seems to be the theory supported by data around the world. Religiosity seems to be declining across different cohorts. And this is something that we are now beginning to see in the Philippines. One of my new publications coming out very soon is tracing the attendance of young people in Catholic parishes on a weekly basis. In the 1990s, Catholic youth would be at church, 61% or more or so of Catholic youth would be at church on a weekly basis. By the time that the latest survey was done, this was in 2018, the figure drops to about 39%. So in a matter of 30 years, you've got a huge decline. So therefore, it raises if you follow the cohort effect hypothesis, the next generation, the next cohort would have fewer young people going to church. So this is how we can appreciate the statement that young people are barometers of religious change. Looking at, is it an effect of being old and therefore you're going to die very soon and therefore you're starting to think about God? Or you grew up being exposed to that kind of belief and practices and therefore that's what you carry for the rest of your life. And then that's what you also transmit to the next generation. But that's not the only way of looking at this particular statement. Sorry, before I carry on, am I clear? Is my accent clear enough, or if I'm speaking too fast, just please let me know, okay? Sometimes I get too excited that I leave myself behind, that I forget that there are other people around me. But it's also an issue of how we know what we know. In sociology, in the social sciences, we call it methodology. How we know what we know. Do we look at national survey and say, this is the trend? So we can come up with the survey that I administered just now. We can administer those 4 questions among all Hong Kong Methodists and conclude that this is the trend among Methodists. That's one way. But there's also another way, the more micro. We're more focused on the communities. Methodist International Church would be very different from the Chinese Methodist Church down the road. And it would be different from the Kowloon Methodist Church on the other side of Hong Kong. So from that perspective, the national surveys don't make sense. The big surveys don't make sense because each community has its own story, has its own culture. And that in itself is also valid. So again, these are different ways of appreciating young people as religious, as barometers of religious change. There are churches that attract more young people. There are other churches that don't attract young people at all. So those are equally valid observations. So in the next couple of slides, this will be a very quick public lecture, to be honest. I'm going to be sharing with you how we, as sociologists, have started to think about young people as barometers of religious change. I'm going to be sharing with you at least 3 or 4 developments that we're seeing, okay? If you have questions in the middle, I mean, it's just us here anyway, please raise your hand and I'm very happy to entertain your question right there and then, okay? The first trend, the big story that we're seeing, especially in North America, is what they say as the rise of the religious nones, N-O-N-E. The religious nones. Meaning to say, these are the people who, when you ask them to choose, to answer what their religious affiliations are, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Zoroastrianism, Hinduism, whatever religious affiliation there might be, people would say none. So these are the religiously unaffiliated, okay, the religious nones. The big story is that for the first time in the long history of America, you have now more people who say they do not have any religious affiliation. 28% of Americans say none. Much now, certainly now bigger than the Catholics, who constitute 23% of the population, and evangelicals, 24% of the population. For us in Asia, this is not really a big deal. A lot of people would say they're free thinkers, for example. This is something that you find common in Singapore, or atheism in places like the Czech Republic, for example. But it is the big story, because that means that the US, especially among young people, seems to have made now a detour. So is it starting to become a post-Christian country, like many European countries? Some sociologists are saying yes. Again, from the point of view of the cohort effect theory. If you have more young people now who are religiously unaffiliated, what beliefs and practices are they going to transmit to the next generation? Nothing. So the decline will just continue. So that's the standard theory, okay? So that's one big story about young people as a barometer of what's to come. So this is one story. Jayeel, is this the only story? The answer is no. Again, contexts matter. The other story is the one that I'm arguing in my book, something a little bit more unique. You've got a lot of young people now, not just in the Philippines, but I think also in Hong Kong. I'm starting to see, in Singapore certainly, and many other places. When you ask them, are you religious? Most of the time they would say, no, but I'm spiritual. Right? You've heard this. I'm seeing a lot of people nodding. You've heard this. I'm spiritual, but not religious. Jayeel, can you explain that a little bit? In the observations of sociologists around the world, when people say that they're spiritual but not religious, it only means that they do not want to be associated with a religious institution. Make sense? So maybe they grew up Methodists, or Anglicans, or Catholics, and they get disillusioned with traditional religion, or religious institution, for one reason or another. They find that maybe my relationship with God is more important than whether I go to church on a given Sunday. So they don't want to be associated with the church, and they refer to it as spirituality. And there's a good literature, a big literature from the 2005, 2010 about this. In the Philippines, it's starting to reflect something like that, but in a more nuanced way. This is something that I argue in my first book. You've got a lot of young people. This is the pattern. Again, this is Catholic, so again, just bear with me. You've got a lot of young people who are, no, not that being Catholic is bad, but I'm just saying that I am talking about Catholicism. It's a different story to Methodism. It didn't mean anything by that. All right, I don't want the Pope to excommunicate me, okay, or for whatever reason. So what it means is that what we are observing is that you've got a lot of young people who are no longer attending their Sunday services on a weekly basis. I told you about that just now. So the decline in mass attendance. But if you look at other indicators, are they still praying? High. Very high. Catholicism in the Philippines is really fun to study. You go to any church on a given Sunday, you would find a lot of young people there, especially if there are examinations coming the next day. They're going to ask, for a blessing, over their pens and their pencils and, the holy water and so forth. Again, partly superstition, but it's also partly religion. That's the belief, right? So prayer life is still strong. And then at the same time, we're now documenting among young Filipinos a changing attitude towards conventional norms about family life and about same-sex relations. Again, I'm imagining that in places like Hong Kong, this is also evident. You have young people. But more importantly, critical of the religious institution. Now, are they leaving the church? Not necessarily. In my research, I found a lot of young people who would say, no, I'm still Catholic, but you don't go to church. It's okay. Because I think there are other ways of being Catholic. So you imagine, the Christians in Hong Kong or in other places, maybe some of them will say that maybe the relationship that I have with God is more important than being in the church and I just fall asleep in the church. Or whatever, right? The theory that I'm using here is reflexive spirituality. So the spirituality that's allowing young people to think more critically about their faith. Maybe that's important, that's not important. Prayer is important, going to church is not important. To be honest, this is an important point to reflect on. Because if you want to be effective in the youth ministry, you meet them where they are instead of imposing the usual standards. You got to be in church, you got to be in church, you got to be in church. But if they don't want to be in church, what do? Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So it's the second trend. So the first trend, religious nuns, disaffiliation or unaffiliation. The second one is the rise of the spiritual but not religious. The third trend what we are seeing, this is an example. This is an example of what I shared with you just now. This is an interview that I had with the president of a faith-based humanitarian organization. In the Philippines, we call it Gawad Kalinga. You can associate this with Habitat for Humanity, so volunteerism and young people participating in shelter building projects. We have something like that too in the Philippines. It's called Gawad Kalinga. I interviewed the president of that youth organization, and this is what she told me. I don't have to go with what the church says. I consult my conscience with everything I do. Sometimes even the simple stuff, like, do we really need to go to Mass on Sundays when I have to prepare for my exams? No, I don't need to. My spirituality is governed by my conscience. I don't need to follow blindly the dictates of the Catholic Church. I am very sure, I have a feeling that this is something we're also now seeing in our own communities. Okay, are you still with me? Useful? Okay, okay. Please don't feel threatened. Okay, we're just here to talk about these things. Okay. The third point. We're now also beginning to see. We also know, in spite of these two trends, spiritual but not religious, or religious nuns, there are churches that attract young people for one reason or another. Scholars, observers, researchers are now beginning to see that actually you've got a lot of young people who are searching for a, whatever this means, okay, deeper encounter of God. And this could be interpreted in so many ways. Many young people are drawn to expressive forms of religiosity. So, I'm using this as an example, but certainly not to make comparisons, okay? Or certainly not to make normative comparisons. Certain churches, evangelical megachurches, charismatic churches, very emotional, they tend to attract young people. And it is what it is. It is what it is. Dancing, singing, raising hands like that. And young people seem to associate those forms of expression with a deeper encounter of God. Is that right or is that wrong? You be the judge. But it is what it is. It's an observation that scholars are now beginning to make also. In sociology of religion, this is what we call intensification. So they may have grown up in a Christian background, let's say, for the sake of example, in an Anglican church, just for the sake of example. And then they grow up realizing something's incomplete here, right? Something's lacking here. And then they get invited by their friend from university to attend a megachurch. And then that person chooses to move to the megachurch because she or he feels that his faith is rekindled there. That's not conversion. In sociology, that's what we call switching. They're just moving from one Christian denomination to another Christian denomination. Okay? So the question, of course, is which spaces are these and why? Something for us to talk about later on. Jayeel, are you saying that traditional churches are boring? I don't know, right? I leave it up to you, right? You decide. I would also be the first to say that certain forms of traditional practices are now attracting young people as well. There's a move now. So some scholars, for example, are now making observations that there are people who grew up in mega churches and now realizing that the formation that they receive in mega churches seems to be not enough either. So they get drawn to my own close friend in Singapore, my best friend in Singapore. That's his story. So he grew up in the mega church, hands raised, singing, crying, emotional. He grew up in that environment. And we became very friends at that time. And then later on, he felt that the teachings are not enough. Now he has moved to a very traditional Bible Presbyterian church, King James Version only. It's a total opposite, right? I mean, somebody who cries is now reading King James Version. That will make me cry, right? But for him, 1611, for him, that becomes more appealing. So that's not, what I'm saying is that for somebody like him in his 20s, rediscovering his faith in a more traditional denomination is a counterpoint to the megachurch story, okay? So that's it, okay? And then finally, this is the fourth trend that we are seeing. So we've seen religious nones. We've seen spiritual but not religious. We've seen the search for deeper encounters of God. And then this one. I think the Methodists in the house and the Catholics in the house will know this. Faith that does justice. They're not interested in crying. They're not interested in raising their hands. They're interested in what sociologists call expressive communalism. Not communism, communalism, okay? Expressive communalism. So, meaning to say, you have young people who are really eager to manifest their faith in the here and now in the context of communities. Expressive communalism. Over at the Asian Methodist Council, we heard a lot of stories about young people being involved in social justice efforts, advocacies, civil society. It's attracting a particular group of young people, generally more educated. So this is an example, I mean, from India. This is not too long ago, 2022. So this is a Lutheran church. Again, you would imagine the Lutheran church, European, on a decline. But in the rest of the world, in places like India, you've got young people being attracted to the social justice advocacies of Lutheranism. So you go to Europe, yeah, maybe Lutheranism is on a decline, clearly. But in the rest of the world, the appeal for justice. And there are explanations to this. I'll get to the explanations shortly. Okay? So 4 trends, folks. These are not complete, but these are the big trends. These are the big stories. Religious nons, spiritual but not religious, faith that does justice, and then search for a deeper encounter of God. So I'm going to ask you now, you don't have to answer this out loud. What are you observing? What patterns are you seeing in your communities? Are they becoming less interested in being affiliated? Religious nuns? Are they looking for social justice? Are they looking for deeper encounters? Maybe this is the big story here. I keep hearing this from friends. Okay? You're all right? All right? Questions for now? Pastor Eden.
I suppose, for me, coming from the UK, what, saddens me is the speed of the decline. Oh, yes. So, when I was, I came into faith through the Methodist Youth Club system, which was huge across the UK. Methodism ran huge amounts of youth work across the UK. Most of it, is gone now. But in my day, 30,000 of us would converge on London every year for a big youth weekend, and march down Whitehall and take over Trafalgar Square and all the rest. But all gone, and really, I'm not in the young adult bracket anymore, but that's within, 35, 40 years. The speed of the decline is, in the UK, has been so rapid.
Within the Methodist denomination?
Yeah, but I would argue across all the churches, really. But certainly in the Methodist Church, I know the best, but I think across all the churches.
Yeah. Why might that be the case?
Well, there must be many factors, and it's some of what you've talked about in terms of cohorts, parents falling away, adults not going and not encouraging their children to go. People in church say, yeah, but young people have so many more things to do these days on a Sunday, Even here, parents say, I've got to take my kids to football or netball or whatever. So there's many more things to do now. Just less interest.
The relevance of the church. Thanks for being honest. In fact, when I was a graduate student, and part of my PhD was in the UK, in Lancaster, one of the big stories back then was that the forecast that by 2030, all Methodist churches in the UK would have closed down by virtue of the death of the members.
Yeah, we're getting very close to that.
That's right. Oh, it's 2024 now, because when I was studying, this was 2007, 2018.
Last year, and the General Secretary tells me that we got from 1 million members 10, 15, 20 years ago to, he thinks, will be down to 80,000 members.
Yep. And the average age might be what, 80, 70? Yeah.
And although we're making members, we're losing more through death.
Exactly. So the replacement level is too low, not fast enough. Yeah. Just to give you an example, sorry, I forgot to mention this. This is an example of an interview that I conducted with another student. Let's just read the quote first, just to exemplify this. This is an interview I conducted with another student. This is what she says. Okay. This is also the same student who's the president of the faith-based humanitarian organization that I was telling you about. I was asking her, okay, so on a given Sunday, would you go to church? No, I would rather volunteer somewhere else. Relevance, going back to your example. This is how she explained it to me. In this way, meaning to say building houses for poor people, Something is at least happening, right? You get to help people. Unlike merely attending Mass, and you're just sitting there as if you're really listening. Sure, you realize something there, but what are you going to do with it? Nothing, right? In the book, I call this right living is more important than right believing. This seems to be a pattern. In the literature, this is what they also call Nancy Ammerman calls golden rule Christianity. So the right living. I don't care whether my understanding of the Trinity is correct, or for the Catholics, transubstantiation is correct. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter as long as I love people and I don't hurt other people. Okay. So that's an example of this, So Jayeel, the big question, why is this happening? So I'm going to wear again my sociological hat, my sociologist hat. Why is this happening? What's going on? Two possible explanations, and again, I need you to reflect on this very carefully also with me. One explanation will be about the church. The other explanation will be about society at large. Where do you want to start? Okay, of course, because you're all people of God. Okay, let's start with the situation within the church. There's a book produced by Barna back in the day. So Barna is a group of researchers interested in religious change in the U.S. The title of the book that they published many, many years ago is You Left Me. A provocative title to challenge the stereotype that it's young people who are leaving the church. The book is turning the argument on its head. No, we did not leave the church. The church left me. I wish I could write a book like that, like very counterintuitive, very provocative, cute title. It sells. And as academics, it's nice to sell books, right? Because many of our books don't really sell, okay? And what's the argument that he's making? There are so many reasons why many young people feel that the church has left them. One of which is what many churches, again, something for us to reflect on, based on that research, tend to be repressive of disagreements, repressive of dissent. In the Philippines, I see this a lot. Unity, don't talk about it. Let's not be divisive in our church. So even in my own faith community, and this is something that I have to deal with, I'm still dealing with, I don't know how to deal with it. The recent elections was divisive for many evangelicals in the Philippines. The state of politics in the Philippines. The son of our dictator now is the president. And churches were divided because many evangelicals, in particular, supported. I'm not talking about politics here for the sake of politicizing the conversation, but I'm just driving an example. So young people who were critical of the politics of their pastors were asked to keep quiet. That's an example of how being repressive of disagreement, what it can be, what it can look like in a church. It's the same thing that Barna, You Left Me, has observed. Intolerance of other people, and particularly the LGBTQ+. Okay? Again, I'm saying this out of, based on research and out of concern. And also, this is the intriguing part. Young people seem to be uncomfortable with, they're observing that in their churches, people tend to be uncomfortable with doubt. When they start questioning their beliefs or theology or doctrines, youth leaders, ministers don't know what to do. They just ask, no, just have faith, or just believe, and the rest will follow. Or let the Holy Spirit teach you. You have a lot of young people now who are far more educated. and especially in places like Hong Kong. And so, yeah. So that's the argument. That's one argument that we can say about the church leaving young people behind, not the other one, not the other way around. But in my work, I also have to say that we are observing that much of the battle for churches in the Philippines is about reputation. Reputation. Why? Because a lot of pastors, priests, even Catholic priests, seem to be involved in corruption, sexual abuses, and so forth. These call into question not just the credibility of the pastor, but the church as a whole. And especially if the church chooses to protect the pastor. We have so many cases about this. Okay? So the other book that I'm writing, I'm writing another book because I don't have so much time, right? So I've decided to just to write another book. I'm writing it with two other co-authors. It's about gender, the struggle for gender equality in the Philippines and religion. One of the things, Pastor Eden, that we're realizing for a lot of young adult Christians across all denominations is that they are wounded because they grew up in traditions that would always tell them that it's wrong, you're sinning, and so forth, without giving them alternatives. So that's the first situation inside the church. The other way of looking at it is in terms of the society at large. And again, our Hong Kong people can understand this a lot more than I can. Places like Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, where the economy is rapidly changing, a lot of young people feel left behind. So they're looking for spaces where they could find comfort and certainty. Megachurches seem to be very effective places where they could find comfort. But on the other hand, in places like the Philippines or Indonesia, where inequality is very high, young people are also left behind. So whether you are in a fast-changing environment or in a highly unequal society like the Philippines or Indonesia, the situation remains the same. Young people are left behind. This is what we call in sociology ontological insecurity. You've got young people who are no longer certain about their future. They can no longer hold on to something. And it's, of course, obviously tied to hope. So, folks, those are the big questions. Those are the big stories behind the big stories, the backstory, right? The reputation of the church, the repressiveness of the church, but also the bigger society, the changes in the society, the problems of society. Which leads us to the final question that we're asking tonight. How then do we respond? Okay? There are no easy answers, but we can discern a few possibilities. And now I'm speaking to the people who are involved here in the faith communities. We can unpack this. I don't think I have all the answers in the world, but I'm providing some possibilities in the hope that you will be able, as ministers, to make them real in your own contexts. Okay? I'm going to be leaving you with 3 possible ways forward. Okay? The first is this: aspire to really know our youth. Aspire to really know our youth. If you were in my sociology class, I'm going to be asking you to do more research about the youth. But I'm not going to do that. If this is a church, I would say sense the youth. Discern where they are. So I've got 3 questions for you, or 4. Who are the youth in our spheres of influence? Are they still among us? Are they the kids of our children, of our members? Are they the children in the schools that we serve, or beyond? What issues matter to them? What are their dreams? I don't know about your communities, but in my experience, I'm bringing this up because, and based on the research, a lot of churches are very much interested in having a curriculum, a standard curriculum of discipleship. We know that. And maybe it's a good thing. right? To have a standard program. You do this, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I heard that also at the Asian Methodist Council. I heard that too. And maybe they have their own reasons for doing that. The question I have as a sociologist is, does that meet young people where they are? Those are two different things. This is why I'm bringing this up. What issues matter to them? What are their dreams? So if these are young people in a place like Hong Kong and they feel left behind, what is the church doing to meet them where they are? Does it make sense? It changes the calculus altogether. You're not concerned about the discipleship program anymore. You're concerned about knowing them. Are they enjoying the church, as Andrea puts it? Right? If not, why not? What issues matter to them? And this is the most difficult question. How do they see our church? Near or far? Empowering or repressive? Safe or hurtful? Tough question, but it needs to be asked. Okay, couple more, just last few more minutes, okay? The second one is based on how you now have us, based on this, based on the first one, aspiring to really know our youth, the second one is this: discern how our community can respond to their needs. Discern how our community can respond to their needs. In other words, how can we become better witnesses, our mentors, our companions to our youth? Just now, Ivan mentioned that in some Christian circles, like the Catholic Church, synodality is a big deal. It's not a word that we use in the Methodist circles, but synodality, the whole idea, what is synodality anyway? Synodality. That's hierarchy, less hierarchy for the church. That's right. The whole idea in the Catholic Church, they have these new conversations about synodality, meaning to say, journeying with other members of the faith community. The center is no longer the priest, but now everybody is involved in the life of the church. There's that. But as Ivan rightly put it just now, it's not necessarily the case, because in many churches, the priest is still the central power, the central authority. So, therefore, all the talk about synodality doesn't translate to anything concrete in the life of our young people. So it's the same question that I'm raising here. So now we know the situation of our youth. We got to reflect, how are we responding? So for example, just to drive home the point, if young people feel alienated in their society like Hong Kong for one reason or another, the question is our church a safe space for young people who are asking difficult questions about society? Does it make sense? Yeah? Or these are questions that we choose to not entertain because they're too divisive. Then if we say yes to that, yeah, too divisive, let's not talk about it, then we fall into the trap of what Barna has already argued as the repressiveness of many churches. And then it becomes an endless vicious cycle. Okay? Finally, assess humbly and honestly our own spaces. Near or far? Are we empowering or repressive? Are we safe or hurtful? So there you have it, folks. 3 things that I am going to leave you with based on what we heard about how religion is changing in the lives of our young people. Number 1, aim or aspire to know our young people more. 2, discern what is the best way forward. Is preaching really the issue? For example, the quality of preaching. I heard that a couple of times. Maybe we need to have better preaching. Maybe not. Because if we know what really young people are looking for, maybe it's not the preaching per se, but friendships, mentoring, time together, safe spaces. I mean, they fall asleep anyway in this church, right? So the quality of preaching doesn't matter. Maybe not in the international church here. It's a very lively church. Okay, right? And then of course, finally, the most important thing I think is this. To be honest, this is something that I am also trying to ask my own community to reflect on. I think, to be honest, I feel that my own religious communities, I'm on the board of a faith-based organization, and these are adults, very seasoned adults I'm working with. I feel that they think they know the youth when in fact they don't. And it pains me because I'm a sociologist of youth and I know the situation and nobody's listening to me because I'm too young compared to them. So this is also very personal to me. So I'm thinking of leaving that community already. And channel my energy somewhere it could be used more effectively. Okay. I will end with this particular quote. This is from the documents of the Synod of the Bishops on Youth, Young People, the Faith, and Vocational Discernment. I know it's Catholic, but let's not antagonize it because it's still a very useful conclusion that they have in the document. This is what they have to say based on their conversations. The young are constantly called to make decisions that give direction to their lives. They want to be heard, acknowledged, and accompanied. Many find that their voice is not considered worthwhile or helpful in social and ecclesial circles. In various situations, little attention is paid to their cry, especially that of the poor and exploited, and there is a lack of adults prepared or willing to listen to them. From the bottom of my heart, as a sociologist, as an educator, and as a man of faith, I hope that we will become spaces where young people we don't need to have a big church where everybody's young, right? At the very least, I hope at the very least that we can be spaces where young people could feel safe. In my theological worldview, if young people at the very least feel safe in our communities, then we have done our part. Proclaiming the good news. Peace on earth and goodwill to all. If I could translate it in Gen Z language, peace on earth and safe spaces to all. Thank you so much, everyone, really, for spending time. It's Friday evening, Pastor Eden, and people chose to be here instead.
Thank you very much. Maybe we've just got 5 minutes if there's burning questions or comments that people would want to make. Is that okay? I think Ralph has a question. He usually does. Do you want to say something, Ralph?
I'm the oldest person here.
Thank you.
I also retire. Professor, I think it's not only the problem of the young people nowadays are facing. I think your question is, or the talk, is about what is the church doing now in a rapid changing society,
Yes.
or the world situation.
Yes.
Are we going down, as Eden was been describing, or not going down, going ahead of the rest of the world, the decline? Are we just looking back because we thought 50 years ago the church was at its height? But recently, someone told me, he said in the last 10 years, not in Hong Kong, in the last 10 years, we've been following the young people and look at what the church is like now. So my question, I wonder, is, if we are talking about the trends you're talking about, and would 10 years later, we come back, we're worse than 10 years ago?
Are you asking me to prophesy, or
Yes, please. Who else?
But I'm not charismatic anymore. Hong Kong or the world? You want me to be honest? Okay. I know, exactly. Exactly. Just amongst ourselves, I suppose. Maybe my friends from Chung Chi will have a lot more to say about this. My honest assessment, my honest observation is that the spaces are becoming more and more limited. And that, to me, is an opportunity for the churches. Can we widen the spaces a little bit? For example, in our small group sessions, can we ask young people, hey, what bothers you about our nation today? And is there anything that you would like to pray for? Then pray for it. That widens the space a little bit. It's difficult, I know, given the climate, to talk about unpacking the structures and the politics and geopolitics and whatnot, right? It's so difficult. But I think if you enter it, if you use the language of prayer and deeper encounter with God, the things that we talked about, justice and faith and all that, maybe justice is a little heavy, but prayer, that might work. That might work. This is not just a problem of Hong Kong, Reverend. This is really the problem in many places around the world, the Philippines included, where asking questions can put you in a very tight spot, whether in society or in the church. Eileen, you're agreeing.
Because, when I came here to this talk or meeting, I came here as a scholar. I wanted to listen to Jayeel and hear what he has to say about the topic, and I know he's been doing a lot of research on religion. But as I listened to the presentation, I think I'm exiting this meeting as a parent, because it's not just the church that is declining in popularity, it's also the family, the parents, no? And a lot of youth are asserting their autonomy in so many different ways that sometimes we cannot, understand or do not have the means to understand. Even though me, for instance, I'm an anthropologist and I studied a lot about human cultures, traditions, values, and have given my children this latitude to engage them in their, as I would say, their point of understanding, because their understanding is not always my understanding, and my understanding is not always their understanding. But it takes a lot of time. My husband and I would call it as a therapy session, because sometimes we would end up talking to my son for 2-3 hours. But in the busy times that we have, considering all our concerns, scholarly, administrative work, having to do all these things for our community, who has 3 hours to, process the experiences of our children? And that's what they need. And I'm not even solving half of the of the issues that they have, even though we are trying to give them that kind of, space, yeah.
That's a very good point that you're making, because my proposition is that you don't have to solve. It's just if the spaces are tightening, widening the spaces a little bit is in itself a breathing. It's like gives them the breather that they need. Does it make sense? Like, yeah, I can see some of you are also nodding. Like, it's just giving them, finally we can talk about this. Finally we can talk about this. Sorry. Yeah.
I think even amongst this small sampling of youth pastors and people who are keenly interested in the youth, there seems to be a disconnect.
Oh, in
there
what
seems
sense?
to be a disconnect in our perception as youth as inactive or lacking to take the initiative. And perhaps maybe our overestimation of the opportunities that we give them to participate. can you give us a little bit illumination on how that occurs, and take a look at how we can make our spaces more safe, more near, more empowering, how we can be better witnesses, mentors, and companions to them, and how we can...
Asking the speaker the questions that the speaker raised. Very good. Very good.
Well, I want to make sure that you're well versed in the language that you use.
Did you want to say something related to that before? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Is it okay? Yeah, let me just give the microphone before I... And then let me find my hand.
Like Eileen, I entered this space like a scholar, but now I'm leaving as a person. But it's more of, I think some of the spaces, I'm reflecting also on my own experience as someone who is spiritual but not religious. And the thing is, there are a lot of spaces that are being provided by the churches. I grew up with a solid Catholic background and having to participate in all of these activities until at a certain point it's a burnout. And there are spaces, sure, but I at some point I feel that it's performative. It's becoming more performative. It's not authentic. And there is already at a certain point in my 20s, for example, I think in my 20s, that I'm looking for authenticity. Not just the space itself, but the authenticity of people who are providing those spaces. And so, for example, like, why are you providing this space for us? Are you just going to ask for more money? Are you going to ask for more tithes? Are you, which is
excellent point.
And then in exchange for for homilies or blessings or for platitudes, etc. And so I'm left almost always I'm left with a sense of, sure, I am praying, sure, I am I'm performing all of these sacraments, but I'm left empty at the end of the day.
Because
I can't feel, I'm not authentic, and I no longer know why I am doing this.
And you feel that way because you don't see the authenticity in the leaders.
In the leaders, in the institutions, even the adults that are following in that space.
Gotcha.
So if we want to perform, if you want to belong, then you have to perform as well. And that is a big difficulty as far as...
Okay. No, I can use... I really feel like you're asking me to be a prophet today, right? To be like Isaiah and talk about anything. I thought I came here as a sociologist, and I'm leaving the place as a prophet. Okay. Some of you in the back, I see you're nodding. If you do have some thoughts, please, and please feel free to pitch in. I want this to be a safe space for all of us. That answers the question Pastor Eric raised, and let me try to synthesize that to address Pastor Eric's point. The credibility of leaders, the reputation of the church rises and falls on the credibility of the leaders. Because, at least in my research, when a leader is accused of enriching himself, you know what I'm talking about, right? Sexual abuses and so forth. I don't know how far I can go with what I'm saying over the microphone, but okay. But that calls into question the institution. And so you have a lot of people who are looking for authentic spaces somewhere else. This is why, Pastor Eric, there's a theologian called Jennifer McBride. Her argument is that churches today need to be involved in public repentance. Whew, what a relief to say that. Now I'm being prophetic. Because the argument that Jennifer McBride is saying is that for the longest time, churches have been trying to just put this aside, right? You know, not to confront the divisions, because we don't want the church to be divided and so forth. Let's pretend that we're all one holy apostolic church, you know, and one united church. But what Jennifer McBride is saying is that if we have caused, if the church leaders in particular have caused the offense amongst ourselves, amongst our young people, shouldn't the church be engaged in public repentance? It's tough because it means that in your prayers, in our communal collective prayers, it means asking God for forgiveness for being complicit in whatever we have been complicit in. Truth be told, I think admitting that in front of our young people is one step towards making our faith community more authentic. In other words, we're not pretending. We're more authentic. Public repentance. Sorry, I mean, I know you're moderating and I keep interjecting.
I suppose we should finish.
Oh, should we? Okay.
Yeah, well, I think so.
Okay.
Unless there's any more burning questions. But thank you. The word authentic, I think, is a big word. I mean, I'm an eternal optimist like our president. We share that, I think. And though the decline in institutional church in the UK is real, I think the creativity that's coming out of that and safe spaces that are coming out of that, what I loved particularly was the new monasticism that's growing all around the world.
Yes.
And that's really people not finding in the institutional church authentic community. So establishing new communities to belong to, and they're all over the world, you know, this new monasticism, as it's called. And I think that's what people are really seeking, truly authentic community to be part of, where they can live out all of those things you've
and they
shared.
don't need to be big, do they?
No, they're often quite small, with a simple rule of life. And
I would love to be part of something like that.
Yeah, so I think they're all over. So, you know, prophetically, like you, who knows what the shape of the church will be in 20 or 30 years' time from now. But I think God is still at work in the church.
Oh, yeah.
And I trust that. So, Jayeel, thank you so much for your wonderful and challenging and inspirational talk tonight.
I hope so.
We really appreciate it. I think we have lots more to talk about and think about and go away to think about and digest. We'll be buying your books to help your scholarly life. So thank you for that. Our president would like to just say a word and offer you a small gift.
Want me to say a word?
Just say a word. You're an optimist.
Reverend Tim.
Okay. Well, I hesitate to say anything because I'm the president. But I'm honestly speaking from my heart as a pastor. I think it is very important or a relief to me when you say the young people now are religious, spiritual but not religious. So I think it's not necessary to bring them into our church as we always think. Maybe they are good as they are. We just want to keep them spiritual, but not religious. But also, I'm a bit worried about the church because in 20, 30 years' time, what happened to the church? But in my optimistic will, what's the purpose of the church? If all the Christians can pray in their home, they can worship on their TV, they can witness or express their faith in their charity work, I think maybe there's no need for the church anymore. Because church is not a building. Church is the people. So maybe is a good news. Yeah.
In the end.
So that's my will. So thank you, Jayeel.
Thank you, Reverend Tim.
Such an inspiring talk, both on Tuesday and tonight.